Hello, welcome to CLSP Politics. Sean Briscoe speaking. So today we're going to kind of look at a what if. We're going to look at the economic impact of the 2018-2019 government shutdown and what that effect would have had on the 2020 election without COVID being there. Because I feel like COVID kind of eclipsed everything, right? This time we don't have that scenario. We have it's also not a presidential cycle. So there's a few differences here, but I thought it was worth looking at moving forward as we continue, you know, to begin to watch all the filings and everything as candidates begin to file for office in December and run for their primaries March through September. So, uh, so without COVID, the shutdown memories stay fresher into 2020, right? So you've got, we had a shutdown that I had to actually look up and figure out how long it was. And then it was COVID. And then, that's all there was, right? There was just nothing else. Media would have revisited it is a symbol of dysfunction, but by that point, everything was a dysfunction. So it's hard to look at 36 days when you had 2 years of 3 years of, homeschooling, just absolutely crazy. Democrats could have pointed at it as a proof of chaos and poor governance, which is an opportunity that we have right now, because this is a proof of chaos and poor governance. But Trump thrives on chaos, but the government does not thrive on poor governance. And Republicans, were they're framed as a tough stand on border security. They use COVID as an excuse to shut the border down and do all sorts of stuff. So, the visibility and salience of the arguments got muddled because of the COVID timeline. So the shutdown cost about 11 to 18 billion in 2019 dollars. The GDP hit was pretty solid in Q1 of 2019. Without COVID recession, impacts looked more significant. The also adjust for inflation, right? Lingering stress on federal workers and contractors, and then remember they had that, and then they had the shutdown, and then they had COVID. So no wonder they were completely just done. The concentrated effects, of course, were in DC, Virginia, Maryland, where most of the federal workforce is. Although I'm about to do a show on where a lot of those federal workers are, and there are a ton up there, but there's a lot in Texas. There's a lot in New Mexico. Anyway, we're doing a show on that later. The federal workers and their families would turn more against Trump because there wasn't this big giant etch-a-sketch of COVID, where everything just kind of got reset. The independent vote. I talk about the independent vote all the time on this channel. The independent vote's incredibly important, and they don't like disruption. They don't like the chaos. They don't even want to be bothered to vote, right? If they have to vote, it's like, oh my God, you're making me vote. That's their voting, right? Base Republicans approve of fight for the wall, but overall support would be weak, I think. And the heightened resentment in swing areas with many federal employees. Some of these races, some of these congressional seats are won by a couple thousand votes. All you need is a couple thousand federal employees. Not that hard to come up with. So there's a lot of those impacts that will carry down through. The shutdown would be defined as a domestic test without COVID overshadowing it, right? It would undermine Trump's strong economy narrative, although he's undermining it himself by not even reporting the numbers. So the impact in the House and the Senate races in Virginia, Colorado, Arizona, Nevada, I think would be the biggest ones because they have a lot of federal workers in those states, and they've got a lot of seats that are up. and likely a modest drag on the GOP performance nationwide, which would, once you start getting into the big numbers, statewide numbers, you start to see a lean towards the left. So I think that's kind of interesting. Thoughts on the impact without COVID shutdown. The cost of GDP would be larger. Democrats gain more ability to brand GOP as dysfunctional, although they do a very good job on that on their own. And I think it would modestly boost Democratic turnout. I think it would depress the Republican. It would just be a huge drag on their overall turnout. I think that's what we're looking at working into the midterms. You got to remember one thing about the midterms. It's not the presidential cycle. There are fewer votes. So the rocks they're throwing into that pond will have a lot more effect. Those ripples will go. It's like throwing a rock in an ocean. Throw a rock in a pond, definitely a big difference. And what we've got here is a big rock getting thrown into a pond of voters that care enough to vote not in a presidential cycle. These are the voters who read and pay attention more, and that they're not so wrapped up in the whole presidential cycle and that whole. It's easier to keep track of one race as opposed to all the races in your state. So generally speak, plus the money in a presidential race is just insane. So there's just a lot more media and eyeball stuff going on there that normally doesn't happen in off presidential cycles. But I think a COVID-less, prolonged 30 plus day government shutdown would have an impact on this election. And quite honestly, it's going to make us relook at the math on some of these congressional seats, because stuff that maybe was a little bit too much of a reach for a Democrat might be reachable. And we may pick up quite a few congressional seats. It won't be a whole bunch in any one state, but five, maybe 10 extra seats can make a really, really big difference in the House. So like and subscribe. That's weird in format, right? If you wish to support this channel, you can go to YouTube at CLSP Politics. I have a PayPal. You can become a paid subscriber to my Substack, which is where all this gets posted first. And I have a website now at CLSP Politics. So yeah, I look forward to hearing everyone's input. I think we're in for quite the ride, and I'm planning on watching the whole thing fold. So good luck, everybody. Talk to you later.